The Dothraki Khalasar led by Khal Drogo have departed Pentos and are heading east. They travel away from the free cities and into the Dothraki Sea, the long-grassed plains that the Dothraki call home. Viserys Targaryen accompanies the Khalasar, meaning to stay with Drogo until he fulfills his end of the bargain and provides him with an army with which to invade Westeros, despite Ser Jorah Mormont's suggestion. He tells Viserys that he offended his liege lord, Eddard Stark, by selling poachers into slavery. When he received word that Eddard meant to execute him for the crime, slavery has been illegal in Westeros for centuries, he fled to Essos. Viserys laughs at the notion, saying such trivialities would not be punished under his reign. Daenerys is finding adapting to her new role as Khaleesi to be a huge challenge. Only Mormont offers her some solace, telling her it will become easier. Daenerys is however fearful of her new husband, and it is revealed that their first sexual encounter has left her slightly injured. One evening, Drogo spends time drinking with his warriors before going into his tent to pay a visit to Daenerys. He violently takes her from behind, and she is visibly uncomfortable, only finding solace in her gift from Illyrio. Later, an increasingly curious Dany asks her handmaidens if they have ever heard of dragons surviving in the east. They reply no, but Doria, a former pleasure girl from Lys, tells her an old story about how there used to be 2 moons in the sky. One wandered too close to the sun and cracked like an egg, spilling out thousands of dragons into the world. Dany's Dothraki handmaiden Ziri and Jiki dismiss the story, saying that the moon is a goddess, wife to the sun. Daenerys seeks the advice of her handmaid Doria, who instructs Daenerys on how to please Drogo in bed but also how to use her skills to gain respect from him. Doria tells Daenerys, "You are no slave," and that Daenerys should not have sex like one. Daenerys nervously puts these plans into action and is surprised to find Drogo responsive, particularly once she starts using her body in combination with the Dothraki language to speak to him. In Winterfell, Bran Stark lies unconscious and badly wounded, his mother by his side. Tyrion Lannister insists to his nephew Joffrey that Joffrey pay his respects to Lord and Lady Stark, since his absence has been noted. When Joffrey refuses, saying the boy means nothing to him, Tyrion slaps Joffrey 3 times until he accepts his uncle's suggestion. Tyrion then breakfasts with his other family members, informing them of his decision to journey north to see the Wall before returning to King's Landing. He also tells them that Bran is expected to live and notes Cersei and Jaime's guarded reactions. Cersei visits Catelyn Stark, who is sitting by her son's side, and tells her that her first child, a beautiful, black-haired boy, died of a fever. She and Robert were grief-stricken and her prayers and tears were for naught. She offers to pray for Bran's survival, hoping that this time the gods will listen. Jon Snow has Winterfell's blacksmith, Mikken, forge a light sword for his sister, Arya. Arya is excited by the gift and names it Needle. Jon also gives her advice on how to best use the weapon, stick them with the pointy end. Jon urges Arya to practice every chance she gets and they hug. Jon then visits his still comatose Bran to say his farewells and kisses his forehead, before departing at his stepmother's cold request. Eddard then says his goodbyes to his son and to a grieved Catelyn, who is angered at his departure while Bran remains ill. Outside, Robb and Jon hug each other before they depart, hoping to see each other soon. The parties depart Winterfell, Jon, Tyrion and Benjen Stark to the Wall, and Eddard, Arya, Sansa and the royal party south to King's Landing. At their parting, Eddard tells Jon, "You are a Stark. You might not have my name, but you have my blood." Ned also promises Jon to tell him about his mother the next time they see one another. Days later, on the King's Road south to the capital, King Robert Baratheon calls a halt to discuss with Eddard some dire news that has just arrived. Robert's spies have learned of Daenerys Targaryen's marriage to Khal Drogo, whose Khalasar is reported to number over 100,000 warriors. Eddard points out that the Dothraki cannot cross the narrow sea, as they have no ships, but Robert is concerned that the Seven Kingdoms will soon face another war. A curious Robert asks Eddard about Willa, the mother of his bastard son, but Eddard refuses to enlighten him. Robert reminds him that at that time, they were in the middle of a war and no one knew if they would ever return to their families. In Winterfell, Catelyn's refusal to leave Bran's side is starting to cause problems for the smooth running of the castle. Robb offers to work with Maester Luwin to put the castle to rights. There is then a fire in part of the castle, but this proves to be a distraction to allow an assassin to attempt to finish off Bran. Catelyn holds the assassin off long enough for Bran's dire wolf to enter the chamber and tear out the assassin's throat. Traveling north, Jon and Tyrion talk, and Tyrion reveals that he reads books to sharpen his mind, his greatest asset and weapon. As it travels north, the party is joined by several new recruits, rapists who chose to take the black rather than face the knife. Tyrion tells Jon that the Night's Watch is not the noble institution it once was, idealized with glorious knights defending the realm against the horrors lurking beyond the wall, and says Jon is smarter than to believe the stories his wet nurse told him about Grumpkins and Snarks and other monsters. In Winterfell, Catelyn goes to the tower from where Bran fell and finds a strand of blonde hair on the floor. She summons Robb, Theon, Luwin and the castle master-at-arms, Ser Roderick Castle, and tells them that she suspects that the Lannisters tried to kill Bran because he might have seen something in the tower. Robb and Theon are all for making war, but Luwin schools them to caution. Catelyn decides that Ned must know the truth and resolves to travel south to King's Landing and meet him there. Ser Roderick will escort Catelyn while Robb will remain in Winterfell to take charge of the castle in Catelyn's absence. Jon's party crests a rise and sees the wall before them. Benjen welcomes them, and Tyrion seems impressed by the wall's sheer size. On the King's Road, the royal party reaches the inn at the Crossroads, a noted way stop on the way south to the capital. Prince Joffrey's bodyguard, Sandor Clegane, also known as the Hound, a man with half his face burned in a mysterious accident, introduces Sansa to Ser Island Payne, the king's headsman, a frightening-looking man who had his tongue torn out on the orders of the Mad King many years ago. Joffrey saves Sansa from this unpleasantness and takes her for a walk along the riverbank. They find Arya practicing her sword work with Micah, the son of the party's butcher. Joffrey pretends to take offense at Micah using a sword on the sister of his betrothed and starts to gleefully cut Micah's face with his sword, but an outraged Arya hits him on the head with a stick. Joffrey quickly becomes violent and threatens Arya at sword point, but before he can hurt her, Arya's dire wolf, Nymeria, attacks Joffrey, biting at his arm. Micah runs off, and Arya throws Joffrey's sword in the river before running off herself. Sansa tries to help Joffrey, but he spitefully tells her to leave him alone and go for help. Arya, knowing that Nymeria will be punished for injuring the prince, forces the dire wolf to flee by throwing a rock at her. She is then taken before the king, who is angered that a minor fracas has become a major incident, with his wife and new hand blaming one another's children. Joffrey offers a false account of the incident, and asks Sansa to confirm it. Put in an impossible position, Sansa refuses to contradict him, enraging Arya. The king decides to let Ned discipline Arya while he will do the same to Joffrey, but Cersei demands that the dire wolf be executed. When Nymeria cannot be found, Cersei spitefully requests that Sansa's dire wolf lady be killed instead, and Robert acquiesces, upsetting Sansa and further angering Arya. Furious, Eddard attends to the matter himself, passing the Hound arriving with Micah's bloodied corpse. Eddard is shocked and disgusted, and when he asks if the Hound ran Micah down, the Hound responds, he ran, but not very fast. Eddard kills Lady with a dagger, and hundreds of miles away, Bran awakens.